Alrighty, welcome in everybody. Happy Tuesday. It is March 5th. It is already March 5th, everybody. This year is moving very fast. All right, we'll go ahead and just give this a minute or two. We'll let folks come in. From there, we'll go ahead and get started. If you guys want to drop in the chat where you're from, I am located in California, and I was just telling Freddie how beautiful the weather is.
Yes. Sadly, in Presentamo, Veronica, I lost the window for the meeting to see everybody, so I will just talk in the background until I can get to the demo side where I can actually see everybody's faces and
It's
see
okay.
the
It's just
chat.
me and your faces. So,
Okay, cool.
all right. Well, we are 2 minutes in, so we'll go ahead and just get started. I want to make sure, we have enough time for everything here and some questions at the end. So, all right. Okay, so welcome in everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I know we've had a ton of people registered from all over the globe, so hello and welcome all. My name is Veronica, and I'm the Customer Success Team Lead here at Transifex, and I'll be your host for today's session. I'm very excited for all of you to be here today for Transifex Masterclass session, where today we'll be bridging design and localization by unleashing the power of Figma-Transifex integration. So today's masterclass session will be conducted by our sales solution engineer, Freddie. Remember, at Transifex, we're here to help lift that language barrier and empower you to engage the world. And we hope that these sessions just help it make it that much easier for you guys to do so and continue to grow your mission and your products. So before I pass it over to Freddie, just want to let you guys know, I'm getting word that the chat might not be working as needed, but we do have the question section. So if you guys have any sort of questions or anything you guys want to point out to us, please feel free to use that questions tab. Go ahead and write in your answers or your questions there. It just kind of helps us be able to see and address those throughout the webinar. So that's it from my side. Freddie, you now have the floor, and take it away.
Great. Thanks, Veronica, for that intro and for getting us started. This session, we're going to cover these following areas. So I just want to touch on these lightly, and then we'll go into some areas for live demonstrations and chat and questions, right? So in essence, who is this training for? Really, this training is for designers and developers that are looking to streamline their localization process. So in that, what I mean is designers working together with developers so that they can build their designs, have their strings available for the designs, and be able to push them into Transifex for translation, and then the developers working in conjunction with those designers so that they can also consume those translations from their own development side of the fence. So you have your designers working on some things, developers working on things as well, and then being able to push those strings and pull those strings from a Figma design that's been pushed into Transifex. Why is the training important? This training is actually going to help bridge that gap between the designers and developers, right? Empowering the teams working with Figma designs and developer code. So things like, for example, in terms of developer code, GitHub integration, having GitHub push and pull content for the code bases, as well as our Transifex native approach as well. I will touch on later today as part of one of the demos. Also, what will we do as part of the training? So we're going to help you discover how to effortlessly sync design iterations, automate translations, and maintain consistency across languages. And on top of that, we're also going to be able to show you how to share the content across multiple applications and areas, both for the designers as well as for the developers. Okay, and at the bottom you see the bullet start out, right? This training is going to help enable a greater understanding of the ways to manage translation processes with Transifex. So with that in mind, we're going to jump into that first demo. So I'm just going to jump out of presentation mode, and hopefully I can find that presentation again when I'm ready. And I'm looking at the chat to make sure that there's not anything in there that I need to look at.
We're good.
Okay. All right. Looks like we're good. Okay. Cool. What we're starting out right now is I'm going to take you through first the Figma side of things, right? Just a designer working in Figma and pushing and pulling strings into and from Transifex, right? And so let's start out with actually from a Figma side, how we're going to connect, right? So here you see in Transifex, I have my Figma project. And right now I have two resources that I can connect to. I can point to either one of these, or I can create a brand new resource. We'll talk about that in a minute. In the way that you set up your projects, as normal, you can have your languages, which you can manage as well. And here I have Greek and Spanish. I can always click on Edit Languages to go ahead and add new languages or remove languages as necessary. Part of the process in the project setup as well, and I wanted to touch a little bit on here, is if we start to go into, for example, the workflow section. The reason why I want to jump in here quickly is because I want to be able to show you the power of translation memory and the translation memory fill-up. And what's going to happen in this case is I can actually turn on my translation memory fill-up. And translation memory, for those who may not be 100% aware, you can consider them as containers or buckets with already translated and reviewed strings for you to leverage in this project and other projects for different resources. By turning on this translation memory fill-up, I am saying that if I have any entries in translation memory,
Really quick,
I want.
Freddie, can you
Yep.
zoom in a little bit? I think we're having some.
Let's see. Let's see. Forget what the zoom is. The zoom in on is on the Mac.
I
Maybe
think
come
if
in.
you go to
Oh,
your
I got
three
it.
dots, yep.
I got it. Is that better? Can we go a little bit? Is that okay?
Probably just do a tiny bit bigger.
A little bit bigger? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Better?
Do a little bit more. Sorry.
A little bit more. Okay. We'll do it. That big?
I
If
think
I
that
go
should be good.
any bigger than that, it's gonna flow off the screen and then I have to do scrolls and stuff like that, right? Is that okay though?
Hold on, really quick. I'm so sorry, everybody. I just want to make sure you guys are getting um, a better view of this because I think right now it's coming up like me and you are really big, but your screen is kind of
Small.
smaller, or
Okay.
your the one that you're presenting is a little bit smaller.
Okay. I'll give
Um,
you a minute to see if you can figure that out.
okay. Let me see here.
Okay.
Okay, this might be the setting that I have on mine, everybody. It is like the biggest that we can have it. So hopefully I just did something. I don't know if you guys can see it, but hopefully it's a little bit better. But if not, if you guys have the display and you put it on full screen, from there you guys can actually pull down me and Freddie into the corner or something like that. So then you guys can watch the actual presentation a little bit bigger. Okay.
Veronica, just a heads up for you. I can see the
Mhm.
questions, but I can't see anything in the chat. So if you can just monitor the chat, if anything comes up on the chat,
Yeah,
let me
I
know.
think the chat is disabled right now, so we're good. So questions is going to be
All
the
right.
only one. I apologize, everybody, for the
Perfect.
technical issues, but we'll make sure that these are fixed for next round. Okay, perfect. Continue on, Freddie. Sorry about that.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Just give me a minute. Okay, so just as I was mentioning, just to set up the translation memory fill-up, so this will auto-fill matching strings within the project as you start adding your resources and working with your resources, right? So this is a good way to provide automation of these translations when we're working with different resources. Really, from an automation standpoint, that's what I wanted to cover in this area. We have review by default and things like that. So with that being said, I'm just going to hit on the resources area here just so we could jump into resources. And now I'm going to jump into my Figma design, and let me know if you can see the design. I'm going to make sure I'm sharing the entire screen, not just a tab. Okay, it looks like you can see the design. So here's a simple design that I have and I always work with. and it looks like the UI or the window of a iPhone 11 Pro Max, right? And what I have here is I have a set of strings that I'm currently working with. So these are the strings that I want to be able to translate from my design into multiple languages, leveraging Transifex. So once I have my design ready, and I'm ready to go ahead and push these designs or the strings over into Transifex, it's a couple of things that we want to make sure we have in play. The first thing is let's go into the upper left corner and just drop into the plugins area. You'll notice that I already have the Transifex plugin set up in this here. But if you didn't, for that first time, you would go into manage plugins, and then you would go ahead and just search for Transifex Figma plugin, and then follow the prompts to set up the Transifex Figma plugin. I'm not going to do that now because I already have it set up and I don't want to um, disrupt anything that's already set up in the current demo and break it and have to troubleshoot. But in this case, once you have it set connected and ready to go, and you follow the steps, I can click on my entire design, and that entire design will give me all of the strings that are available in my design that I can push into Transifex for translation, and then I can manage what I want, right? So if, for example, I only wanted two, so let me click back out of this. If I only wanted to do this one and this one, I can multi-select and only do those two. Or in my case, I want the entire design to be pushed into Transifex. And you'll see the list of the strings available for push. Now, by default, you don't see it right now, but by default, when you first do this, the strings, the custom key name is going to be the same as the string, right? And so what Transifex does is, because it needs that key, it will assign the key of the same as the string. Now, for custom key names, the reason why we use this is this gives us the flexibility to set keys for these specific strings, which in turn will allow us to, if we wanted to, for example, we're working with developers or whatever it may be, and we want to go ahead and use these same strings in other applications. For example, I'm going to show you in the next demo where we're pushing into the same project as GitHub. Also, I'm going to show where we're pushing these strings into a project with our Transifex native as well, right? So that's where these keys come in handy. Gives you that flexibility to have a key set, and then we can search from our code base to pull those strings and in other applications. Okay, once we have that set up, there's a couple of things to note here. The upload screenshots is checked by default. What this is going to do is when we do that push into Transifex, it is actually going to create a screenshot and do the mapping of the strings to that screenshot for us automatically. And I'll show you what that looks like in Transifex. We can also, if we wanted to, if the resource is already existed in Transifex, we can replace the existing resource strings if we want to as part of the push process. I'm gonna pause for a quick minute because I know I've been going on. Are there any questions so far on this?
Looks like there is a question in our chat. Or I'm sorry,
Okay.
in the questions tab.
The only thing I see is
it says, does the add-on work with any type of projects and resource file types?
Great question. So this add-on, thanks Veronica for starting the live. This add-on works. It's a fileless resource. So you have a file-based project, but it's a fileless resource. So it will work in that fashion. But because it's a fileless resource, you can allow it. That's how you're able to use it with Transifex Native, because Transifex Native is also fileless, and that's the resource type that is done for the Figma integration, right? So it's a fileless resource. It's not like JSON, XML, or HTML, or so on and so forth. It is a fileless resource. So I hope that answers the question effectively enough. But because it's fileless, there's a couple of ways that we can use it, right? We can use it with the Transifex native, and I'll show you that in a little bit. But its file type is fileless. But now when you're downloading it back, you get the strings here in the Figma, like I'll show you in a minute. But you could also download the resource from Transifex as an XLIF or JSON, if I'm not mistaken. Those are the two types that you would be able to download it as. Cool. Thanks for that, Veronica. I had questions, the last question at the bottom, so I didn't see that one come in.
Sorry, it looks like there's a follow-up to that. So the add-ons only work for the fileless resources. Oh, wait,
well, only the Figma integration works with the fileless resource on this stage, right? GitHub, you could use any file type. Transifex native is also fileless. And then if you're using a file-based project, you can use any type of our accepted file format types. But this one here only works for fileless resources. Great question. Any others before I move on? Cool. Okay, one thing before I do the push, I wanted to show as part of the setup is the settings section. And this is the reason why I'm showing this now is because it's going to come into play with the other two demos, right? So in the settings section, you grab your API token from Transifex, you place it in here, you make your connection, then you select the organization that you're going to work with. I'll show you right now. I'm in the Transifex onboarding organization. I picked my SE Figma demo project, which I just showed you in the previous screen with the UI. And then we have the SE. We have the resource that is part of that project, or we can create a new resource. Great. So let me answer this. Great question. Right now, it's only meant to support a file-based project, but a fileless resource. I don't know if that's going to change in the future or not, but we can check with the product team and see if that's going to be the case. But I don't think it's going to support anything other than a file-based project, but a fileless resource. Great questions. All right, once we have this set up here, like I said, you can tie it to an existing fileless resource, or you can create a brand new one in the project that you're working in. So I wanted to show this because I'm going to come back and forth to this, and I didn't want it to be a surprise when we do run into this screen again. So now that I'm ready to push my strings to Transifex for translation. And so now I'm just going to hit push here. What you'll notice is that it's going to attempt to push the strings into Transifex. Right now, I have pushed 0 strings because these strings already exist in my project. So you see the 0 strings. It skipped 5 unchanged because I haven't changed anything from the strings. And it also uploaded 1 screenshot. So once this is done from this standpoint, now if we jump into Transifex and we go to this resource, so we do a quick little refresh here. And we go to, this was the resource that we selected, right? The SE Figma resource 1. I'll click on that. And I go to the Spanish. You'll see that I'm able to go ahead and translate in Spanish. And here we go. A couple of things I want to point out here is that the strings were pushed into Transifex. You'll notice that if I scroll, can I scroll down? I might have to minimize the view a little bit here. Hold on. If I minimize this a little bit so you can see, you'll see that it's getting sent with a tag from Figma indicating that it comes from Figma. And here's the key that I was talking about, right? You see, I set up my custom key as Figma_signup. And that allows me to be able to find this key from my code applications, from any other areas where I want to pull this same string that came from Figma and use it in other applications, right? So that's where that key comes into play. Now, as a translator, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. You have your icons to the left, which indicate whether a string is translated or not. You'll see it's a gray string. It's a gray circle. It's untranslated. But also what I wanted to point out is that there's a screenshot tied to the string, right? Because we've mapped the screenshots to the strings. And so now I can either click on this and say, I want to translate via the screenshot and enable view all map strings. And then I can just go ahead and toggle between each one and translate as I need to, right? Again, if we think back to the translation memory and translation memory fill up that I was talking about, what you'll notice is that with the translation memory fill up, if there were translation memory strings in available for us, they would show up in the suggestions area, and we would be able to leverage it. Or if we had the translation memory fill up enabled, these would have already been translated for us via that translation memory fill up. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and translate a couple of strings. We have the option to freeform or freehand translate, which we can do here, or I can leverage MT translate to translate. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and save that. Let's say, for example, if I want to do first name, I'll go ahead and just click on the Transifex AI to translate first name. And then let's do one more string, right? Let's do the last name. And I'll do that one. Let's do that one again with the Transifex AI and save the translation. So now I have 3 strings that I've translated, 2 that are still remaining to translate. Right now, when I want to retrieve these in Figma, as a designer, I come back here and I get notified that there are translations that are ready for me, or whatever it may be, right? If you invite your designers as collaborators, you could get the notification that there's translations ready for you. Or Transifex also has webhooks that we can connect to, so you can have your dev team connect to those webhooks for those notifications when your translation is completed, review is completed, proofread is completed, and so on and so forth. Once that's ready, as a designer, I can come in here and say, I want to pull my strings from Transifex. And so I can say, I want to pull all of them, or I would just want to pull a certain set of strings that I want to actually review. In that case, I can go ahead and X these out that I don't want to pull over and just pull the ones that I want, or I can pull them all. In this case, I'm going to pull them all, even though I didn't translate all of them. Your options here are you can do all target languages, or being that I know I just did Spanish, I just want to focus on my Spanish. And then I have an option here as well. By default, if I don't pull it in the current page, I'm going to get a new page in Figma that's going to have my translation. The reason why I like to use the pull in current page is because I want to be able to see the English with my translated ones side by side, right? And so I'm going to select the pull in current page, and then I'm just going to hit pull. Now, when I hit pull, let me just move this over here to the side. You'll notice that now I have my English to the left and my Spanish to the right. And now I can see the strings that have been translated for me. Right? Make sense? Any questions so far on this? This is about the gist of the Figma integration itself, like the flow, right? Design, push the Transifex, translate, pull back down into Figma for your designers to review. I'll pause for a minute to see if there are any other questions that pop up. If not, I'll just go ahead and continue. Okay, cool. For that, let me go back to where is my slide. I keep losing my slide. Sorry about that. All right, let me go ahead and pull this back up. All right, cool. Here we go. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and.
Looks like a question just came in.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Let me just go ahead and do the key takeaways from this one, and then I'll come back to the question. Right. So, key takeaways from this one is the ability to accelerate your localization workflow and go to market faster by bringing your design, your product design and localization teams closer with Figma. And then also speeding up your localization. Oh, it looks like it's repeated. Oh, no. All right, speeding up your localization workflow. Okay, and go to market by bringing product design and localization teams closer with the Figma plugin. Let me jump out so I can see what the question is. And in this case, hold on. All right, cool. Now I can jump back to that really quick. Okay, so what's the question? Does it support only plain strings, no plurals, placeholders, and so on? All right, great question. If I'm not mistaken, it does support plurals and placeholders, as well as Transifex itself does support plurals, placeholders, and things like that for its resources. And I don't have the example in this project for a plural example, but or one with placeholders. But if we have some time at the end, I can show you what it would look like, the strings with the plural and placeholders later on if we have a little bit of time. Great question. Cool. Any other ones before I jump into the next one? It's just these demos now are just going to come building on one another, right? Nope. Okay. So I will go ahead and move on. Cool. Let me find my slide again. And go ahead and go into presenter mode. We just did the key takeaways. The next one is going to be the demoing the Figma plugin with GitHub. So let me just jump back out of this. And so here, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take this same set of Figma strings, right? So when we did this first flow and this first interaction, we did it directly into a Figma project, right? So we set up a Figma project, we went in and we did everything that we needed to do for that Figma project. Now, let's say, for example, I want to push these same strings into another project, for example. So let's go ahead and let me delete this. And we'll come back here. And we want to push this to a project that, for example, has also GitHub tied in it. So now I jump into the settings. This is where I said I'll toggle back and forth between the settings, right? Everything else is still set up the same. The flow is still the same. You do your designs. The difference here is that you want to make sure that the keys, like I mentioned, and the first flow are keys that you as a designer and coders have worked together to identify. These are going to be the main keys for these strings so that we can provide reuse and ease of use, right? We come back into the settings now. And now I'm going to actually switch to a different organization. Actually, no, same organization. I'm going to switch projects. I'm going to go into my GitHub demo project. And in there, what we'll notice is that I don't have any fileless resources in that project, but I can go ahead and create a brand new resource. And so I'm going to call this one Figma. Oops. Figma underscore demo underscore resource. And then I'm just going to hit create. What this is going to do for me is it's going to create a Figma demo resource in my same project where I have my GitHub integration set up. And so I'm just going to save this so that it can make the connection. And cool. Now I'm ready to go ahead and push these strings to that project. Now the message here should be different, right? Because I don't have that resource in the GitHub project. So it should actually say that it did 5 strings with an updated and uploaded a screenshot, right? So let's go ahead and click push and see what comes back. All right. Great question. It should pull back for all the languages. So it more than likely will be the end viewpoints, but I can show that in a moment, right? Because we did have Spanish and we did have Greek. So when I get ready to pull it down, just someone remind me if I forget to just show how all the languages would look in this particular view. I would expect Spanish and Greek in my case, and if you have n number, I would expect n number side by side each other. Great question. Cool. So what you notice is here, it pushed 5 strings and uploaded 1 screenshot, where our message before was 0 strings pushed, but updated, or it didn't update any. Now I'm going to switch to my GitHub project here. And what you'll notice here is if I do a refresh on this one, you're going to see a new resource. Oops, let me go back to the resources. I wasn't in resources. Here's my Figma demo resource that was just created by the integration, by the Figma integration. What I want you to notice in here is that I have multiple resource files coming in from my GitHub repo, right? So all of these are coming from GitHub. The beauty of being able to do this is that I have a project with GitHub that already has been worked on, has an existing translation memory, and I want to be able to have everything in one project. I'm able to do that with the Figma integration and the GitHub integration together. So now I have one project that I can work with, one project that I can have all my resources and pull from if necessary. We can always separate them and keep GitHub by itself, and then have the Figma project by itself, and then share translation memory using translation memory groups. But in the event where you want everything in one project, easy access to go ahead and know which, all I have to worry about is, hey, I'm working in the SE GitHub demo project. I know that I have my GitHub stuff in there. I have my Figma resources in there. I only have one place to go search for my resources and the strings corresponding to those resources. And then again, similar to what we did before, if I want to come in here and translate some of the strings, it's the exact same setup as we did previously. I can go ahead and multi-select these and run it through machine translation, or I can create a task and have a human translate these, or leverage Transifex AI to bulk translate, or like I said, mentioned in here with the machine translate, I can hit machine translate and let my machine translation tool that I'm using go ahead and translate these strings for me. Okay. Now, when we're talking about pulling these strings, I mentioned that from the GitHub standpoint, it's in my project. So as a developer, I can, from my application code, I can just go ahead and say, hey, I need to talk to the GitHub project, and I want to pull the resource called Figma demo resource, and then I pull my translations that way via code. From Figma, it would be the same exact way that I did the other ones, right? And I don't think I have German in this one, so I'll go back to the other one and do the multi-view so we can see it. But what I would do here is the same thing I did before, right? I jump into my pull strings from Transifex, and then I'll select Spanish, I think, again, because I did it in Spanish, and then pull my Spanish. Right. So now, again, same approach from the Figma side. The behavior is always going to be the same from a designer standpoint. You push it from Figma after you create your design, and then when it's ready and you get your notification that it's ready, you pull it back down from the wizard, the plugin wizard, and pull your strings, and you can see your strings and work with them with the translations. Make sense so far? Any questions on this bit here? Perfect. Cool. Let me do something real quick before I move on to the key takeaways from this particular section and the native project. Let me go back in here and let me point to the original one that I was working on, Figma demo, so I can help answer the previous question. And now I save this so that I can connect to that. And so I'm working here, and I come in here and I say I want to pull all target languages into the current page. Hopefully, let's see if it still works. So there we go. There's my Spanish, there's my Greek, and all the way to the left is my English, right? So this gives you that idea of the end viewpoints. It's similar to if I didn't have this checkbox checked, for example, it would create a page with my designs and the translations for every language that I was translating in or that I did the translations for, right? The only difference in here is that because I have this selected, they're going to show up side by side each other on the same exact page. Okay, and you'll notice that if I move this plugin to the side a little bit, it's because I don't want to just close it. You'll see that the Greek is fully 100% translated. My Spanish only has a few translations. That's a great question. I'm not 100% sure why it's in lowercase. It's probably because the way the translation came back. I'm sorry, I didn't hit start live answer, but I can just start it and end it quickly. I hope that answers the question. Yeah, it's just a matter of how it came back from a translation standpoint. Great question. Let me delete the Spanish and the Greek. Set myself up this way quickly. Let me make sure there's no other questions. Okay, cool. Let me go ahead and bring the slide back up. Oh, I'm sorry. Is from the view is the push? I'm not sure. The push strings button. Is it referring to this piece here or? I'm hoping that you guys can still see the push. Yes. Okay. Cool. Cool. Sorry, I just noticed that from the questions section, so I apologize for not seeing that earlier. Okay. Cool. Now, last but not least, we're gonna go into the last section, right? And so for here, let's take a quick look at the key takeaways from this section. Really, the key takeaway from here is having a unified content hosting, right? In this case, we're grabbing strings or resources from multiple areas and unifying it under a singular project, right? We have like I showed you, we have resources coming from GitHub. We also have the resource that we created coming from Figma, all into a singular project for us to use as a one-stop shop or a one container for everything that we want to work with. Also, effortless source content import. Again, easy import from Figma and from GitHub. GitHub is automatic. As soon as you add a resource or update a resource in GitHub, it automatically creates and or updates a resource in Transifex, and then it does the push when the translations are ready. And then effortless translation content export. Again, I showed you from the I didn't show the GitHub, but from the GitHub, a pull request automatically gets created for us in your GitHub repository for all the translations that reach your threshold. It's either 100% translated or 100% reviewed or 100% proofread. And from a Figma standpoint, the designer gets a notification and then the designer decides to pull down the strings that they want or that are already readily available for them to work with. The next one is going to be although this one says the same thing, it should have said native, but I'll fix the slides.
Before you get to the native part, Willie,
Yep.
we just have two more questions.
Yeah, I'm about to jump in there now. I just got out
Okay.
the slide share. Thanks. So we have two. Okay, I see. Is it possible to invoke? So hold on. Oh, there's another one. All right. So they're coming fast and furious. Hold on. What is the upload screenshot checkbox? I think I showed that one. The upload screenshot checkbox is set by default. And what it does is it takes this design and the integration actually creates a screenshot for you in Transifex with the string mappings for the resource for the resource and its strings. That's kind of what I showed you when I did the first demo, that I clicked on the screenshots and it showed you an actual screenshot of this with the mappings, right? So if we look back at this one, it's basically this here that it creates for us. So it takes a screenshot of that design, uploads it into Transifex, and does the string mappings for us. That's what that takes care of. Cool. Where is it now? What's the next one? Okay. Is it possible to invoke Transifex Figma add-on via scripts and API? Great question. I'm not 100% sure if you're able to invoke it via the scripts and or API, but in all honesty, if you're already going to use scripts and API, then you probably don't necessarily need the Figma integration. This Figma integration is intended to be a bridge for the designers to push and pull. If you're already going to use scripts and or API to push and pull, you probably don't need the Figma integration because you're already doing the push and pull on your own, and you can hook into webhooks and things like that to be able to get notifications when your translations are ready so that you can execute the pull command via your script or your API. But I can check and just verify whether it does it or not. Cool. Great questions. The next one is Peter. Oh, okay. So somebody answered the question that I did with Peter. Uh, is the plugin free? Um, Veronica, I may need some help on this one. I'm not sure. I think it's included based off of the new pricing, correct? If I'm not
I will
mistaken.
double check that. I don't want to say the wrong thing here, so I can double
Yeah,
check
no,
that, and then we'll reach out to you and we can
yeah,
get that
thanks.
answered for you.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, it's included as part of the new subscription and pricing plans. But let us confirm, right? We don't want to say something that's wrong or misleading. So we'll get back to you on the plugin and if it's free or not. And was that the last question? Okay, there's another one. We use push pull using the API, but I guess the plugin might be useful as well. Yeah, that's what I was mentioning, right? If you're already doing push and pull via the API or some sort of script, it all depends on your team, how they're working with Transifex, and how they're currently getting the strings back and forth, right? The beauty of having the Figma integration to help you do the push and pull is that you allow your designers the flexibility of working with the designs, playing with all the designs that they want, and then themselves pushing and pulling as needed without having to worry about anything going on behind the scenes or notifying anyone to execute push and pulls, right? And this is you basically giving your designers that latitude and that flexibility to go ahead and push and pull those strings from the designs as needed, right? So it's all going to be dependent on your team, the structure, and how you want to set up your workflow, but either way will work. Awesome. Any other questions before I jump into the next one?
So I'm just sorry, I'm gonna hop in here really quick. I know we only have 2 more minutes left that's scheduled for this webinar. If you guys can stay, we'll go ahead and we'll continue it. This will be recorded, or it is being recorded, and it actually will be emailed to you guys. So if for whatever reason you cannot stay for the rest of it, definitely check out the recording that'll get sent to you guys after this.
Thanks, Veronica. Shall I continue, Veronica?
There's one more question that just came in. If you want to answer that, and then we can move forward.
Sure. Okay. For an organization that uses only file-based projects and file-based resources, is there currently any way to leverage Transifex? Yeah. So, like I mentioned when I did the setup, the although it's a fileless resource, you're using a file-based project, right? So if you see here, let me go back to my design section here and go to the dashboard. You'll see that my SE Figma demo is a file-based project, right? And I'm pushing the Figma strings into a file-based project as a fileless resource. Also in the GitHub one, again, GitHub is also file-based, and it has resources coming from GitHub of different types, right? Resource files, JSON, Word docs, text files, and things of that nature. And I was also able to push the Figma resource into this file-based project. So the fact that it's considered a fileless resource is not going to hinder you from being able to use a file-based project if you're already currently using a file-based project. It's just going to work in conjunction with that, right? As you can see with the GitHub one, I have file-based. They're both file-based projects, but this one allows me to leverage resources coming from GitHub that could be of any file format. It's just that the Figma resource is going to live in there as a fileless resource. Does that help answer your question? I hope it helped answer your question. Okay, cool. Um, with that being said, let me jump into the last one. It's going to be super quick. And I just want to go ahead and just run you through the process, right? We don't need to go through all the details all over again, but we come back into the Figma design. I'm going to jump into the settings area. In the settings area, I'm going to switch now organizations. So I'm going to switch to this organization. I'm going to go into my project. That's my React Native. And then I'm going to go ahead and instead of creating a new resource, because a native project is a fileless resource by itself, I'm going to go ahead and drop this list down and select my React Native demo as the resource that I want to push my Figma strings into, and then I'm going to hit save. Now, before I actually do the push, I want to show you what the React resource actually looks like right now. So if you look at this resource, it's only one resource. I'm going to click on this, and let's just go to Spanish because we've been sticking with Spanish this whole demo. And I click on the strings. You're going to see that here I have my strings that are coming from my React SDK for my native project. So these are coming from that particular project. Now, when I go back to the Figma design and I say, hey, I want to push these strings now into that product, that same resource, I'm going to go ahead and leave everything the same way it is. You notice I have these keys. That's the reason why I did these custom keys. I'm going to click on push. And now you're going to see, again, similar to the GitHub session that we did, it pushed 5 strings to that project and a resource, and it uploaded 1 screenshot, right? Now, what that does is that flexibility is going to go in here. And now when I come in here and I do a refresh, now I have not only in the same project, but I have the strings from Figma in the same resource. So now I'm sharing strings coming from my React Native project and now coming from Figma. Now I have one project that I can, not only one project, but one resource that I can share my strings. And from a React application standpoint, all I have to do is point to these keys, and I can retrieve the translations for my Figma strings from this project. And that's pretty much it from showing that. Let me just show you the quick key takeaways from this area. Here, the key takeaways from this one is seamlessly sharing content from Figma with native. Also, keeping the source content up to date with automatic updates coming from the SDK and your Figma designs, and then retrieving the designer's strings and integrating them into the code. And then the next slide, obviously, is questions, but we've been doing questions throughout the process. I want to check and see if there are any other questions before I go ahead and move forward. Okay, I think that's it. I don't see any other
Yeah, no new
questions.
questions.
Cool. Veronica, I'm not sure what we want to, if we want to just end it now or just leave it open for another minute or so to see if there are any other additional questions.
Yeah, let's just leave it open for a second. So thank you, Freddie. I appreciate, you going through that demo with us. So as we're waiting, just to make sure there's no last minute straggler questions that come in, before we part ways today, I just wanted to remind everybody to register for our next few webinars we have over the next few weeks. Next week, we'll actually be learning about the integration with Zendesk, which is also led by Freddie. So same time, same place, next Tuesday, 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Eastern time, and 6 p.m. Eastern European time. And then always be sure to check out our help center on our Transifex website. Make your voice be heard, be in our community forum. And if you guys have any further questions that we weren't able to answer here, or just anything in general Transifex wise, please feel free to reach out to our support team. They will be here to help answer any questions. And again, as I said earlier, you guys will receive a recording for this webinar, and you guys actually will receive a survey. So if you guys have a moment, it's really short. You guys can go ahead and just take that. It'll be really helpful for us if you guys took the survey. Let us know a little bit more of what you would like to see, and we would love to hear from everybody. So yes, Freddie, it looks like there is one more question, so take it away.
Yeah, I think you answered it already. It was the will we receive the recording and slides?
Yeah, for sure. So this will be sent out after, just take a little bit of time to generate, but you guys will receive an email with all of this. And if for whatever reason that doesn't happen, please reach out to support and we can make sure we get this over to you guys as well.
Great. I want to thank everyone for taking the journey with me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody. We appreciate your time. Sorry we went over. We had a little technical difficulties, but we'll make sure that that's fixed for next week. Be sure to register with us there and join us next week for Zendesk. And everybody have a wonderful day.
Thanks. Have a good one, everyone.
Thanks.